You know the thing. You'll say you'll just go for one or two. But, you know, the problem with alcohol is it has the inherent power of being like kryptonite to common sense. Then, of course, when the barmaid asks if that's a double, you hear the immortal words, "Oh, go on then. It would be rude not to." Before you know it, you've snored yourself awake at 5 in the morning with a palate like sandpaper and a throbbing pain behind your eyes, and you're squeezing your temples and praying for sleep in the vain hope that the next day isn't a total write-off. But how much is too much? Government advice can feel pretty austere to huge swathes of the population who bulldoze their way through weekly allocations of units in a couple of cocktails. But do we really understand the damage it's doing to us? And how reversible are the harms? When it comes to banning the booze, it would frankly take Taliban rule to extract the vat of vino from my gaggle of girlfriends manicured claws. But how can we really learn to imbibe those sage words, consume in moderation? And what would convince us to do so? Let's get in another round of opinions and try to get to the source of the issue. Well, first up, David Nutt, Professor of Neuropsychopharmacology at Imperial College London, an expert in substance abuse, joins me now. Professor Nutt, it's fantastic having you back on the programme. We've spoken previously about other drugs, but what about alcohol? I mean, to many of us, it just feels like such an innocuous, pleasant habit, but what effects does it have on the body?
Well, it affects pretty much every single part of the body, and the problem with alcohol is that the relationship or the harms are non-linear. The more you drink, the much more harm you get. So if you double your consumption from, say, half a bottle of wine a day to a bottle of wine a day, you increase the harms by about 6 to 8-fold. And that is why the government is keen for you to drink less, because every small reduction you produce in your drinking has a disproportionately greater beneficial effect on your health.
In terms of, what do you think the government guidelines are in the right place when it comes to units? It's a relatively confusing system, but it advocates, not really much more than a glass of wine a day. Is that about right? Because I think a lot of people tend to be drinking a lot more than that.
Well, the reality is if you drink to the government guidelines, it will have very little impact on your health. But if you drink above the government guidelines, then you will begin to impact on your health. And one of the reasons the book you say up on my shelf here, Drink Book, is there because in that book I look at the amount of months or years of life you lose if you drink above those guidelines. And if you drink at the old guidelines, for instance, it used to be 28 units for men and 21 for women, then that takes about 6 months off your life if you drink over about 40 years. So most people, I think, would say, well, that's not the end of the world. 6 months at the end of your life may not be a big problem. It is a problem, of course, if you happen to run into problems when you're very drunk and have a car accident or something. So, young people can be disproportionately affected by alcohol. But for most of us, the benefits of alcohol in moderation, if you can do that, outweigh the possible loss of a few months of life at the end.
In terms of if people have gone on a binge, if they think that they've, maybe had a few reckless years of their life, I don't know, say at university, does that leave lasting damage? If people decide, I want to quit the source now, I want to put myself in a healthier position, whether it's losing weight, getting better sleep, having better moods, how quickly can the body heal itself? Or do we actually leave lasting damage if we're high consumers of alcohol?
Well, for most of us, we don't leave lasting damage. I mean, the lasting damage comes in usually those young men who've got into fights or had traffic accidents where they damage their brain as a result of drinking. But for organs like the liver or the heart, cutting down or stopping in your 30s and 40s is one way of minimizing the harm. That healing will take place. That is absolutely the case. Yes.
Do you think in the UK we have a pragmatic and sensible relationship when it comes to regulating alcohol? Or do you think that we need to start perhaps recasting our gaze and potentially putting it in the same category as drugs that are outlawed?
Well, it clearly is a drug, and it's clearly been exempted from drug laws by the government. They've made that explicit. They know it's harmful, but they've decided that the social benefits, both in terms of people enjoying it, and also the taxation that it brings in, outweighs the harms. Of course, they don't. Alcohol still is a net cost to society. We subsidise drinking, and that's actually what we should be doing. There are two things we really should be doing. One is to try to get the pricing of alcohol back to where it was back in the 1950s and 60s, because the actual real cost of alcohol has dropped by about 2/3 in the last 50 years or so. And that's led to us drinking more and led it to being more of a problem, particularly in young people. And the other thing we should be doing is trying to find ways of giving people the sociability and the conviviality and the experiences they get with alcohol, but without alcohol. And that's something I've been working on for a long time, because alcohol is a really good drug for socializing, and that's why most of us use it. But we could find alternatives. It didn't give you hangovers and didn't damage your liver, and that's completely a tractable scientific problem, and I've been working on for a long time, and I think we should be encouraging other groups as well as my own to do that.
And so how do you do that? How do you potentially have fun without alcohol?
Well, what we've been working on is developing alternative drinks which have elements in them that mimics the good effects of alcohol, like the relaxation, the sociability, but don't get you really drunk and don't damage your liver and don't give you hangovers. We're trying to, in science can focus its attention on the positive effects of alcohol, mimic those in the brain without targeting much less the negative effects. It's just a simple question of finding the right molecules. We're looking at them in plants, herbs that have been around for a long time. We're also inventing specific molecules that we can put into drinks that will do what we want alcohol to do with or much less of the harms.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to tasting it if you ever get round to finishing it and releasing it, Professor Nutt.
Alexa, send me an email and I'll send you a bottle of the new stuff. All right?
Oh, I'm not going to turn that down. It's coming your way. Don't you worry. And I'll be raising a glass to you. Thank you so much. Always great having you on the show.